The idea behind the Gateway project is to gather as many corruption assessment tools as we can into a large database so that people who want to measure corruption or analyse corruption can find tools that have already been developed to help them do that. Corruption is notoriously difficult to measure because it's something that's hidden, right? It's covert, people aren't open about it. And so over the past 20 years, more or less, we've kind of designed, not we, but lots of different organisations have designed different tools to measure corruption. Initially, these tools focused largely on perceptions. So you would ask people about their perceptions of corruption in a country or in a specific sector. And that has its uses, but obviously it also has its limitations because perceptions only tell you so much of the story. And then what became apparent is that perhaps what might be more useful, in certain cases at least, would be to measure the opposite of corruption. So rather than measuring instances of corruption, you would measure how strong a country is, a company is, a sector is in fighting corruption. So you'd look at transparency, accountability, levels of integrity as a kind of proxy for anti-corruption. So those would be the two main ways. And a third way that is quite interesting, a sort of more recent attempt to look at corruption, is looking at corruption risks rather than corruption per se. So again, it's focusing more on the anti-corruption side and looking where weaknesses are in the system so that you can identify areas for strengthening that system. Transparency International is quite well known for its Corruption Perceptions Index, which it releases every year. And the index, as I say, is based on perception, so it does have its limitations, but it does give you a good broad overview of how corruption is seen at the country level. And I mean, I guess there are no great surprises. The countries that do better on the Corruption Perceptions Index tend to be the Nordic countries. New Zealand, I think, is usually up at the top, and the poorer developing countries tend to be further down the ranking. So that's one indication of how bad it is. But really, as I say, that only gives you a broad overview. And there are certain sectors which you could argue are more prone to corruption, like construction, for example, infrastructure. Public procurement is another area which is quite generally sort of understood as quite prone to corruption because of the interaction between the public and the private sector. Transparency International recently released a report looking at corruption or anti-corruption in 25 countries in the European Union, known as the National Integrity Systems Assessment Approach. And there are a few things that came out there that are very interesting, that really more work needs to be done. For example, on regulating lobbying, on political party financing. These are areas that really need to be more controlled, certainly in the European context.